don't think the embedded movie is going to work. We're just going to go past that. Kind of, it's such a sensitive topic, and I think joking about it helps, but not everyone might think joking about it helps. And so, but again, here I am with another joke. So your lecture on human diversity will be delivered by a middle-aged white guy. So, yeah, that's me, and there are my sexy bird legs. That is a pair of lederhosen. It is a traditional outfit of southern Germany. The male workers, carpenters, lumber cutters, so lumberjacks, farmers, anyone that was doing manual labor in southern Germany, they would wear this outfit during the summertime because it kept him cool in the hot sun outside. And so that's where the lederhosen outfit came from. It is buckskin leather shorts and a set of leather suspenders, and usually they have those floral designs and patterns written into them. This was on my vacation just before we got started with this curriculum for this 20 graduates of 2027 class. I went to Helen, Georgia, where they were holding an Oktoberfest, and so me and my son got dressed up for Oktoberfest. So I am 25% genetically Northern German. My mother's maiden name is Dieko, D-I-E-K-O-W, which is actually more of a Polish name than a Northern German name, but there's lots of, as we'll see when we talk about cultures, there's a lot of mixing of cultures over time. And so Northern Germans and Polish people have a lot of common ancestry. And so it did not surprise me that my mother's maiden name was actually Polish rather than German. So, all right, human diversity. Well, what is it? Well, that's what we're going to talk about in the next 17, 18 slides or so. Talk about diversity characteristics, but and I do want to say before we get going, trigger warnings. Some of this stuff, unfortunately, is at the front of our politics and a lot of our societal fights and arguments, both on the internet and in the streets right now, is about topics related to this. This is more of an appreciation, though, of the differences, not so much a pointing out of the differences and how those differences clash, but an appreciation of the differences and just an acknowledgement that just because you don't worship the same God I do doesn't mean we can't get along with each other. It doesn't mean we can't live on the same street, in the same town, so long as we respect each other's boundaries. Okay, that's what I think the spirit of diversity ought to be. And so I will do my best to stay away from any of the conflicts or abrasive issues as best I can, while acknowledging that some of these differences are hot button topics right now. So, but the spirit of the exercise in developing you and your maturity and your emotional intelligence and your outlook in patient care as a healthcare professional is to appreciate the differences, and by appreciating those differences, sometimes you appreciate your blessings, sometimes you're made more aware of your burdens, and that is the value of diversity is you might see that other people are doing things different and they seem to be having more fun than you. So that's and that is a lesson. I am a great fan of the blues, And John Mayer is one of the premier artists. Eric Clapton is one of the premier artists. And then Joey Bonamassa is one of the premier artists. And these are all white guys. And I'm like, what the hell happened? Well, we liked it so much that we started participating. And now some people will call that cultural appropriation. I think it might be the highest compliment in the world if a white guy comes along and steals what you're doing, or meals that you're making, or songs that you're singing, and styles and artistic works and such. Well, that's flattery. That's what that is. Because yeah, we just that is the epitome of white culture in the United States. Is we appreciate things different than white culture so much that we can't help but appropriate it. Now, if you have problems with appropriation, then you probably are not going to like white people too much, because that's what we do. We just say, oh, that's cool, I'd like to try that. So and that might be reflective of white American culture, is we like to dabble in lots of other cultures. So human diversity is the differences we see between human beings, young and old, black versus white, versus Asian, and then you go into Asian ethnicities, and there's Japanese, and there's Korean, and there's Chinese, Vietnamese, Laotian, Filipino, and so ethnicity is kind of like your genetic makeup. It is your ancestral story, versus national origin is the country that you're born in. And so you can have Asian ancestry, but there's, as I just demonstrated, there's diversity within Asian ancestry. And the history of the Japanese people is different than the history of the Chinese people. They're interrelated. Those countries are in close proximity, and they have quite a bit of conflict history between those two nations, and as well as the Filipinos and the Vietnamese, the Laotians, the Koreans. All of these cultures group. So Asia is the geography, and then you have nation states with long histories, and then you have cultures coming out of those nation states where it's a national identity, and so we get subclasses of an Asian ethnicity, and different cultures and different religious practices. Now, some things are in common, some things are different. Things in common, from India came Hinduism, which in its journey into Indochina and Vietnam and Laos first, and then in China, it transformed into Buddhism. And then Buddhism reached Japan, and then it transformed into Zen Buddhism. And so these different religions, the Tao Buddhists, the Zen Buddhists, the Hindus, originally from India, bringing the religion, and now the religion of Buddhism, and to a lesser extent Hinduism. Buddhism really flourished in Asia, but it got treated differently by the different cultures. The study of Chinese Buddhism is very, very different than the study of Laotian Buddhism, very, very different than the study of Japanese Buddhism. It's all Buddhism, but they took it in different directions, and so very, very fascinating. And some of that comes up from the history and the events and the identity of nation states. And so we are China. We have this religion, Buddhism. We are going to adapt it to our existing practices, and we're going to augment it and make it our own. And similarly, the Japanese, they imported it from China, or maybe had it forced on them. I'm not up on my medieval Asian history. I do know that there was conquering going on back and forth between China and Japan, one country more dominant than the other, and shifts of power and such. And so it creates in the modern times, when you have recorded history and nation states and distributions of ideas and various religions, and then influential leaders developing those ideas and bringing them into the culture, and whole groups of people participating in this and following those leaders. And then you get commerce, trade, communication between cultures. You get mixing of races. You get mixing of political ideas. And so what we see is what anyone could have predicted is, as different nation states interact with each other, as modes of travel become more and more advanced technologically, as we developed boats that could navigate the oceans, and railroad and horseback transportation and the chariot and the wagon, as we developed these things, we were necessarily going to interact with folks that were different than us, and ideas are exchanged, and religion spreads, and all sorts of things. And so, and I'm rambling, but that's how we get to modern America and the U.S. mainstream culture. Now, we do have a dominant cultural identity, and we will talk about that through this lecture. But it's very, very complex, and there are subcultures within the United States. And some of those subcultures are actually under fire because of recent history. Okay? And so we'll pivot back to cultural competency, and that's a skill set being developed by a healthcare professional that talks about valuing diversity, understanding diversity, understanding the way you would react to certain news in medicine, like your leg is broken, or you have a heart condition, or you need to take this medication, or so on and so forth, might be not the same way that everyone on the planet from every different culture might react to any of those bits of information. Okay? And so we have to be cognizant of that sometimes cultural beliefs, religious beliefs, influence medical decisions for people because of it's part of their identity, effectively. Okay? We'll talk about areas of human diversity that healthcare providers need to understand to provide high quality healthcare and effective care. Because if you don't understand your patient, where they're coming from, and what their backstory is, and that their culture and their belief systems are a part of them as much as their gender identity, as much as their age and their height. And all of these things influence how they participate in Western medicine, in American healthcare. And so you need to, a culturally competent technologist will have to have an awareness of those situations, that not every patient is going to act exactly like you would, and is going to make the same value judgments that you would. Okay, so human diversity. Let's talk about what is. So we've got some folks celebrating Christmas, but they're doing so with sparklers on a rooftop. Where's the Christmas tree? Where are the Christmas lights? Where are the presents underneath the tree? And so similar, but maybe different. Maybe this is a European Christmas celebration. And then we have Dia de los Muertos, um, which is a holiday in Mexico honoring the dead. And then we can't have a lecture here in Nashville about human diversity without talking about music. Okay, and so let's see, do we have, yeah, we've got some pop-ups. So human diversity deals with a variety of human societies and cultures and examines their similarities and differences. So it's not always about what's different between us, especially because focusing on just differences leads more often leads to conflict than it does acceptance. And so similarities are just as valuable, I would say more valuable, than differences. Okay? Society is made up of many cultures, and that is certainly true for America. We have a very diverse population in America, in our cities and in our suburbs, in our rural areas too, though not as much. And then even in sub-regions of our country, there is different types of diversity. So here in Tennessee, we're a little bit closer to our southern border in Texas, and so we see a large Latino population from immigration from Central and South America. We also, being in the South in Tennessee, and understanding the history of our country, there is a larger population of blacks. If you prefer African Americans, I don't like that term because, well, I think it's too cumbersome. I think it is, first of all, it assumes that all blacks come from Africa, and it might be that yes, your great grandfather or great great grandfather, or keep going back, did originate from Africa at some moment in time, but I think it's, yeah, African American. I think it just, I don't know, it's got political charge to it now, and I really don't like talking with folks using politically charged words, and so that's why I prefer blacks, because I don't think black is a politically charged word. But beyond blacks and African Americans, I also don't like, I do want to recognize groups, but I don't want to dismiss individual action and individual opinion and free will either. And so, yeah, there's a lot of nuance and traps with this, and yeah, I know, but it's a complex subject. I know that I'm drifting off of the main goal, but I think it's important enough that we do need to interject some opinions about things, and there are culture wars going on currently in America, and it's kind of got us all at high anxiety, and I really don't like being at high anxiety with folks that look different than me. I don't like being at high anxiety. I don't like having that sub-conflict just under the surface. I think it's time America grows up. I think it's time for us to have honest conversations rather than have conversations where it's a false dichotomy. It's this group versus that group. It's really not. It's both of those groups versus a bunch of knuckleheads that are trying to tell you that you need to be fighting each other when you don't. So cultures establish behaviors of people. Okay, and so yeah, you're raised hopefully by your parents and possibly some influence by your grandparents, either directly or indirectly. So were your parents raised right? That's a big indicator. And how were they raised? Were they raised that they went to church every Sunday? Well, then you might find yourself going to church every Sunday. And you might be wondering why. But before too long, you just understand that this is the way it is. This is the way our family believes. And now you might go the other way. You might become an adult and you might open some philosophy textbooks and you might say, hey, wait a minute, I've got some questions. I don't want to go and just blindly accept this story, this narrative. I want to explore these ideas a little bit, and I want to do it without external influence and bias. I don't want to talk to folks that have already made this decision. I want to listen to the folks that are still asking questions. And then you might find yourself in a completely different place. And that's where I find myself. Now, I still identify as a Christian, but I have explored Buddhism. I have explored Zen meditation. I encountered it first as a mental health exercise and a stress relief tool, but it worked as a mental health exercise and a stress relief tool. And so I wanted to know further. I'm like, how did we get to these breathing exercises? What is the story of Buddhism that led them to the meditations? What led them to these practices? So what's the backstory? And so it was just, I have a curious mind. I want to learn about as much as I can for as long as I can. And so I started learning about Buddhism. Now, am I a practicing Buddhist? No, but I'm not a practicing Christian either, but I'm not an evil person either. I think that both educations in a Christian childhood upbringing and then an adult Buddhist exploration have made me a better humanitarian. Understanding one religion makes you human. Understanding two or more religions makes you a humanitarian necessarily, because you understand that there are 2 or 3 different paths to get to the same place, which is to be someone who has matured and is aware that the only way God takes action is if we stimulate that action. And so we are agents of a higher power, whether you want to call that God or Allah or the great beyond or the giant flying spaghetti monster. Our good actions and our deliberate actions and our considerate actions make us a better participant in what we call society and culture. Okay? And so cultures are funny things. Cultures most of the time are adopted, and you're doing things subconsciously throughout the year, and they pop up the most during celebrations. But they also it's little things like when is dinner time, when is supper time. And see, here in the South, dinner and supper are 2 different things. Dinner is your lunch, versus in the North, dinner and supper are synonyms. They're both the evening meal. And so, but when do you eat the evening meal? Because me and my family, we eat our evening meal at 5 o'clock. But, which is really peculiar because Angela's cousins, they eat their evening meal at 7 o'clock. And so even that's her aunt's daughter. That's not too far away in the family tree. And there's just, now it could be that it was the marriage partner's influence. I've always ate, when I was growing up, I ate my dinners at 5 o'clock. Waiting to 7 o'clock, oh my God, I would be passing out. My stomach would be gnawing at me. But other folks, they eat at 7 o'clock. Like, why are you eating so early? It's like, well, I'm hungry. And this is how we've always done it. So, yeah. So little patterns of behavior through your daily, yearly, monthly life. A lot of that is your culture. Okay. Which church do you go to? Which type of Christian are you? Are you Catholic? Are you Protestant? And then if you are Protestant, are you Baptist, Presbyterian, Methodist? Okay. Are you not even Christian at all? Are you Jewish or Muslim? Okay. And then stop to ask yourself, why? Why are you that faith? And 9 times out of 10, the answer you come to is, well, that's how my mom and dad raised me. I was raised into this. I've never considered myself anything else. I was raised Methodist. And so I like Methodists. So, yeah. And so a lot of times, a lot of the cultural choices are really connections with previous generations. All right, cultures can be for a lifetime. Notice that that's optional. And they provide comfort. It sure is nice to have some kind of ritual, some kind of celebration, some kind of, like the obvious one, Christmas. For most Christians, Christmas is just a fun time. It's a grand celebration. We get together with our friends and our families and our loved ones, and we exchange gifts in celebration of the birth of the Savior. Okay? For other religions, other holidays, there is Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur is, I believe it's called the Jewish New Year, and God keeps a book. I forget what the name of the book is, but Jews believe that God writes down basically your biography, your life story, and all of the good things you've done in the prior year. During the Jewish New Year, during Yom Kippur, and so it's a record of your journey through life. So, all right, and so we have all these people with different backgrounds, possibly from different nation states, following different religions, moving to different places in the world, being born in different places in the world at different stages of their lives. Well, let's start communicating. And it started out with trade routes, and then and of course there was always war. But let's keep things positive. Trade routes, and then immigration, and that was the dawn of immigration was born out of war. Refugee immigration was probably the first form of immigration. Hey, look, those two groups of people are killing each other. Oh, yeah, that's way too close for comfort. Let's move. Let's get out of here. Yeah. And so, but then as technology grew, we developed better technologies for communication, better technologies for transportation, and it became easier for us to go to different countries, to different parts of the world, to different continents, but also became easier for us to stay here, but also communicate with folks far, far away from different lands. And so, yeah, the internet is the sum total progression of that right now, and is the leading forefront. Now, the internet is not all great, and so, just take some reflection here. Is this good or bad? And I'd say for the lion's share of the interactions, yeah, decidedly good. I would say north of 80% of interactions with other cultures are productive interactions and don't lead to conflict or struggle or bad things. It's just we have these people that suffer under the illusion that they can't get along with their neighbors. They can't get along with the next country over. And they're being influenced by rhetoric and leaders who have a power complex ultimately. But we get this huge network, an unfathomable network. You're never going to see all the internet. Let that sink in and break brain for a second. We've built something so big that you'll never see all of it. Okay? You don't really want to see all of it. There's some dark parts. But what an amazing tool this is, that we can share ideas with each other, hopefully productive ideas. We have to resist the yelling and screaming at each other over our differences, and we have to look for ways to become multicultural, become cross-cultural, become culturally diverse, become astute in cultural diversity, because that is the reality we will face now that this has started. We don't want to put it back, and again, this might follow entropy, such that systems tending toward disorder. Well, we don't keep the Chinese people in China. Let's let them move around the world and talk to other folks. And we don't keep the Japanese people in Japan. Let's let them move around. And we don't keep Americans in America. Well, maybe we do, until we learn to behave. Maybe we do keep the Americans in America, but yeah, just jokes, folks. But yeah, whether it is good or bad, it's not like we can undo what's been done now. We are mixing with each other. We are encountering people from a wide variety of backgrounds, dealing with a wide variety of issues. And some of them are blessed. I don't really like to, again, charge language. I don't want to use what is that? The privilege. Yeah. That is politically charged language. I can tell you as a white person. Am I privileged? Sure. I was raised speaking English, and I was raised Christian, and my skin is white, so I do have advantages. I am the dominant ethnic group in the culture still, but by a slim margin. But using the word privileges immediately takes it into a us against them framework. And I really don't like those frameworks. So that's why, if you want to call it privilege, you're welcome to. Just, you have to be aware. If you're culturally diverse and culturally aware, you have to be aware that the language used in the media, used in public debate, it is meant to divide rather than to unite. And you've got to be aware of that part of it. That's tearing American culture apart, and I really don't want to tear American culture apart. We will not like what happens next. We won't. All right. And so while I say don't focus on differences, we need to be aware of these differences, especially because this is where conflict starts. This is where, and Everyone is human, and everyone makes assumptions. And your patient will be making just as many assumptions as you, and your patient will have biases. And if we're not aware that these differences do create a hierarchy or a tier where some people have an easier go within the society than other folks do, okay, then that's going to give us some pitfalls as a healthcare professional. Okay? And we need to also understand that a lot of the perceived discrimination is due to an ignorance about cultural diversity. Okay? And I will confess, as a white guy, I don't know much about Japanese. I know a fair amount of black culture. I was raised by liberal parents. I was allowed to listen to rap music when I was young. I love blues music. I love Southern soul food. And so I think I'm moderately versed in black culture. The missing piece is I haven't experienced discrimination. Okay? I know all the shiny, happy parts of black culture, all the parts where black folks are having a good time and it is fun stuff. Even the blues is amazing art. I mean, the songs are sad if you listen to the lyrics, but the artistry and the expression of that sadness, that's an amazing, beautiful thing. That is so clearly, God, blues with electric guitar, it sounds like a woman crying when you play electric guitar blues the right way. All right, and so I've talked long enough. You guys should have, while I was rambling, written down 5 ways that people are different from each other. Now I'm going to hit on some of these with these mouse clicks, and so let's go. All right, race, first and foremost. This is on the front line of American political discourse. Okay? And I would say along with race, ethnicity. Okay? And I don't know, that might be a later part in the list, but there are certainly differences between races and it's not just black versus white. There are Latinos, there are Laotians, there are Japanese, there are Chinese, there are Guatemalans, there are Jordanians and Arabians and Egyptians and Eastern Europeans. There are Polish people, there are German immigrants, there are we don't get a lot of French. They're not big fans. There are some Canadians. Okay. It's like, what? Canada? Yeah, they're kind of. I mean, they're nice. They're much more nice than Americans, but they're kind of quirky versus your typical American white guy. Canadian is different in a nice way, but different. Yeah. General gender or sexual orientation, and then even that first word, gender, that's politically charged, because how many are there? Okay, and depending upon your personal belief system, you have a different answer to that question. Okay? I think that, and again, we have to address these awkward things. Because we need to have an awareness of the awkward things. Okay? I have a belief about what the answer is to how many genders there are. And it's nobody's business but mine. Okay? And if I were a practicing X-ray tech, if I get somebody who believes differently to that question, that's got nothing to do with me serving them and performing X-ray exams on them. And so I would have no problem with providing health care to an individual who answered that question differently than I did. Economic conditions. Oh yeah. Life is hard. Life is harder when you are poor. And so there are just things. Well, that's what technology is. If you think about a car is a utility ultimately. Yes, it's also an aesthetic. It's some cars are beautiful, but it is ultimately it's a utility. It gets you. It is super efficient at getting you across long distances. Like, let's say you wanted to go to Atlanta, Georgia for an X-ray conference. If you have an automobile, that becomes a minor hassle. You do have to drive for 4 hours. But I do own an automobile because I have a sound job and because I can pay for my automobile and I can afford insurance and gas for it. And so me versus someone who is unemployed, do they have housing? Do they have food, clothing, shelter? And so economic conditions immediately goes to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And in the extreme, it threatens the health and well-being of the individual. Okay, versus now Biggie did say more money, more problems, but at least for the first 100,000, more money, less problems. Okay, money is a great problem solver on the personal level. On the federal governmental level, less efficient. But on the personal level, money is a great problem solver. If you have a problem, you can purchase various forms of technology that helps you solve that problem. But if you can't afford that technology, then you have to find another way to solve the problem. So, yeah, economic conditions greatly influence your progression on Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And so therefore you develop a different mindset if you're on that low tier, you're in survivor mode, versus if you're on one of the more upper tiers, you're no longer in survival mode, and then you're able to exercise a little bit more creativity. You're able to pursue noble things like your noble principles like truth and beauty and fun. Okay. Religious beliefs. So yeah, fun, strike that. We're not allowed to do that because we're Baptists. Okay? But yeah, if you want to gamble, you should join up with the Catholics, because they actually convert the ancillary hall into a little bingo operation every Wednesday night. And so the Catholics have no problem with drinking and gambling, whereas the Baptists are notorious against both of those activities. Okay, and so you will see a clash of personal behaviors across different religious beliefs. Muslims do not drink alcohol. Okay? Because alcohol is actually, they define alcohol as a poison and a toxin. Now, marijuana is different. Muslims can partake in marijuana, or at least that's what I've heard. So don't quote me on a lot of this stuff. This is stuff I've learned off of the internet, and as you know, everything off the internet is true. First language. Oh my God. Now, if you understand the words that I'm saying right now, now you're acutely aware that you remember that privileged word I don't like to say? Yeah. So if you can read, write, and listen to and engage in a conversation in English, you have an economic advantage over folks that can't on this planet. English is, because of world history and the domination of the English as a world superpower, coming out of the Renaissance all the way up until about World War I. English is the language of commerce because the English were the first one to conduct world commerce, world colonization too, but world commerce. And so English still to this day is the default language of commerce, and thus people who are native English speakers have an advantage over non-native English speakers. Political beliefs, yes. And this is more and more, this is how we like to sort ourselves, at least in our online identity, is according to political beliefs. But that is we are creating separate realities, at least virtually, because the algorithms do what they do. And so when you search certain topics, you get back those topics, and so you self-reinforce your own worldview. And it's called perception bubbles. And there is a liberal perception bubble internet, and then there's a conservative perception bubble internet. And those are two separate internets, and people on the one internet rarely interact with people on the other internet. Did you realize our internet had a schism to it? It really, really does, okay? Especially in this country, okay? And then also our news, which is just modeling the internet. The internet is our conscious, is our collective conscious. And because the algorithms have sorted it, now the question you might ask is why is so much invested in giving us the people who arrive looking for different types of information and identifying as different political beliefs? Why so much effort to keep our information packets separate and not let us read the other person's information packets? Yeah, there is a invisible hand that is trying to create dissent and trying to keep us mad at each other. And it is, you're gonna figure out where I land politically since I say this, but there is a deep state, and one of the primary projects of the deep state is to keep the American people fighting with the other half of the American people. So we don't realize that the deep state are utter crooks that are just spending money like drunken sailors and destroying our future and robbing from our grandchildren. Okay. And then finally, disability. This one hits close to home with my special needs child, but also to a certain extent with myself. Even though I'm not on disability, I am diagnosed with a couple disabilities, but I've never exercised a right to accommodation because of my disability. I think that my disability is close enough to normal behavior, and I had gone so long without diagnosing it that I think I developed adequate coping mechanisms for my. Now, do I lose my car keys more than you do? Yeah. Is that frustrating? Yeah. But that's the hand I was dealt, and I'm cool with that. I'm training myself to leave my car keys in the basket right next to the back door. And so I've trained myself into certain habits to cope with the fact that I have ADHD and autism. And so I need to stick to those patterns and those coping mechanisms, and I'm able to live a normal, healthy life. And I recognize where I have an understanding of my limits. And yeah, I don't think that anyone needs to pity me or give me any kind of special treatment or breaks as a result of my disability. I think it's, and that's what I wish for everyone with a disability. I wish that now some folks like my son, they're always going to need help. But I really want to empower the disabled. I want, to the extent that they can, I want them to adapt and overcome. Okay? Do I believe that they should be left without any kind of support or assistance? Absolutely not. But I also think that it builds their own character and their personal pride to adapt and overcome their disability. But yeah, we can help them out. Absolutely, so long as they want the help. Okay. Yeah, one of the funniest things is the first time I x-rayed someone who was wheelchair bound, and I went and reached for the handles to push them, and they kind of slapped my hand away, or just reach. And it was just teasing, but they're like, "No, I got it. Just show me where to go." And they started wheeling themselves. And so it's, yeah, that's that self-empowerment that, yeah, I know I've been dealt this hand where I'm not able to do everything that everyone else can do. But dang it, that doesn't mean that I can't live. That doesn't mean that I can't try to achieve some things, to complete some goals and live a full life. And so, yeah, we have to acknowledge that sometimes these folks need some help, but we also have to acknowledge that they also need the opportunity for empowerment, just as you as I need the opportunity for empowerment. Okay. It's just as simple as I give you quiz questions, and I don't always walk you through the answers. I tell you that it was in the PowerPoint or in the book. That's me acknowledging that you're capable of growth. You're capable of looking that up by yourself. You're capable of being self-responsible for your own education. I don't have to hand you everything. You can figure some things out on your own. And so also, why shouldn't a disabled person have that same consideration and it really is, it's a personal respect for your abilities, either the abilities you've already recognized that you have, or your potential abilities that I know are there, but they haven't manifested yet. Yeah. All right. And so now those weren't all the differences, but we need to be aware of differences, but we don't need to start fights over differences. Differences are great, okay? Can you imagine how boring it would be if everyone on the planet was me? Oh my God. It would be blah, 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 blah. Would you all stop talking? And then we'd all do this at once. Would you all stop talking so I could talk? Because I have important ideas. And then we'd all look at each other. And then we'd all roll our eyes and shake our heads like, okay, well, I guess I'll just keep my ideas to myself. And then we'd all go play video games. And then we'd have a grand time. There might be some swearing and some drinking, but we'd all have a great time. Okay. All right. So personal biases. Everyone has some degree of personal biases. Yeah. On my front burner, and I do my best to try to conceal this from the students, but I'm getting good at identifying student behaviors now, and I can tell when a student is coasting. I can tell when they have. Now, it might not be that I didn't say lazy. I said they're coasting. They might have good reason to coast. Okay. They might be that their dad's on total care. Their dad just had a stroke, and now he's living on the living room couch and he needs total care in your downtime. Okay? That's a huge burden. That's a huge lift. And so, maybe, hopefully, you're in the top of the class at that point. If that life event happens to you, I wish that it wouldn't while you were in X-ray school, but we can't control these things. Okay? But I get it why you're neglecting your studies and you're just maybe looking at the PowerPoint on the morning of the quiz, right? And hoping for the best and just hoping to pass, even though you were in the first semester, you were doing straight A work. You were at about 96, 97%. Now you're down to 89. Okay. Yeah, I get it. Okay. But I can see those folks. Okay. And human nature, I try to fight this. I'm getting better at it, but we always assume the worst. We always assume lazy, right? It's not always that. Okay. Sometimes it truly is, but it's not always that. Okay. Sometimes it's something went sideways and it's chewing up a lot of my time. Okay. You might have had some bias until you read the full length of the email when I said I was canceling. Oh, he partied too hard in Atlanta and he's hungover. I didn't party hardly at all. I had one beer with a steak dinner. I didn't party hard at all. And my son, he's doing good. He's starting to eat a little bit and he's well hydrated. So we think we're going to be able to avoid a hospital stay. We'll keep our fingers crossed. But he definitely he's got some kind of GI issue. So, but you might have been biased when you read the first line of my email. Oh, Mr. Tilton needs to stay off because essentially he was working on Saturday, or he tied one on, right? That would not be outside my character to tie one on at a conference. No fraternizing with student cohorts, but it wasn't this time. So just because you were biased and you thought that I partied a little too hard, perhaps, maybe for 5 seconds, and you don't have to confess that to me. And I really don't care about my students' judgment of my personal life. So, it's okay for you to have biases, because I have biases too. Okay. I have biases about students who show a decline. I tend to assume laziness. Now, I won't ever accuse them. I have too much professionalism. But it's always, there's always that subconscious in the during those conversations. It's like, okay, what's really, because this is what you're telling me, but what's really going on? Or you just needed a day on the couch. And I also believe in the mental health day too. And so, yeah, I get it. This is a lot. Radiologic technology is a lot. It's a tough job. It's mentally and physically exhausting. Yeah, X-ray school, doubly so. Okay. Personal biases, even without conscious thought, play a major role in how individuals perceive others. Yeah, and so it's just common things are common. The longer you live, the more you have to interact with people necessarily somewhere in your past, especially as a middle-aged person. You've been burned a time or two. You had an interaction you thought was going one way and it went decidedly a different way, and you felt wronged or cheated by the person you were dealing with. And so you learned a lesson. You're like, hey, when that kind of scenario happens again, that's a scam. That person's bullshitting me. Yeah, that's a load of horse pucky, as my dad would say. Okay. Yeah, And so those are your personal biases, just negative interactions in your past, and you identify flags and have value judgments about those negative interactions, and you can see you start recognizing patterns and then you just that, and coupled with the human nature of assuming the worst, which we all do, leads you into either a subconscious bias or a conscious bias. The subconscious biases are dangerous. Okay, it's very much like all the hostile rhetoric on the internet. Okay, so the social media Nazi who is using racial slurs on the internet and putting people down because of their ethnic or racial or religious background, and wishing and othering and wishing bad things on people different than them. That's really not the person you have to worry about. Okay? You don't have to worry about them because they've telegraphed their biases, their awful opinions. Okay, you can see them coming a mile away, and you say, "Oh, yeah, you're going to be hanging out here? Yeah, I am the freedom of association, pal. I'm going." Or block. You're on the internet. It's not a real place. It's a virtual place, right? Block. I don't want to listen to the garbage opinions coming out of your mouth. Block. You are no longer privileged enough to participate in my reality. That is empowering. Yeah. Blocking is how we stop these people. Okay. But that's not the really dangerous one. The really dangerous one is the one that has personal biases, but they're not aware of them. They're not broadcasting them. They might not even be articulating them as thoughts. They just have knee-jerk reactions and funny responses. And then you see those responses, and a third-party observer is like, "Ooh, that's telling." But it's that one comment amongst thousands and thousands of interactions. It's like, hey, wait a minute, they don't even realize. Yeah, and that's the dangerous one, the one that doesn't even realize. Okay, and so self-awareness is part of this journey. Okay, you have personal biases. Okay? Some good, some bad. Some of them are making you the horse with blinders on. Okay, you like the carriage rides at Central Park. Sometimes those biases are making you the horse with blinders on. Okay. Sometimes that gets in the way of the progress you need to make, though, especially in the clinical setting. And so you have to be aware of your biases, which means you have to be self-aware, and you need to try to figure out what your subconscious biases are. Okay. So an example I got, this was I want to say it was right after COVID. It was like 2022. One of the clinical preceptors has scored my student low on monthly clinical evaluations for quantity of production and I think either attendance or professionalism or something. And the comments were, "Student disappears from the department often." It's like, okay, yeah, pretty straightforward. You can't be dodging the work. That's that's a bad habit. You can't be doing that nonsense. You're part of the team. You're there to take X-rays, and so you can't be wandering off like that and just ducking your responsibilities at clinical education. Well, that is not, in fact, what the student was doing. And so let's see what the rest of the story was. Yeah, I don't know if you know much about Islam, practices Islam, and folks who identify as Muslim and practice the Muslim faith, but they pray to Mecca not just once, 5 times a day. Sunrise, okay, lunchtime, dinner time, sunset, and then I think they have another one that they sneak in there somewhere. Okay, possibly bedtime if they go to bed after sunset. So 5 times a day they pray to Mecca. Okay, and they have to figure out which way Mecca is, and they have to put down a little rug or a little mat to kneel on, and then they go pray. Okay. So the trouble was, is the student was doing this because I said, we're not discriminatory. She could do that, but she never told the clinical preceptor where she was going and what she was doing. And so the clinical preceptor, he exhibited a bias there, right? I know this clinical preceptor, he's working for me, and it was an innocent mistake. And once I explained it, he said, oh, well, why didn't she just tell me? And we fixed the score on the evaluation, because it was permitted activity. It was something she was allowed to do. And so once that was explained where she was, well, then that's not a big deal anymore. It's not the same as, ducking out to dodge the work. That wasn't the intent. So, yeah, but the preceptor had a bias, and he acted on that bias because, well, to be fair, he didn't know the whole story though. So, all right, so our U.S. mainstream values, and you can activity, hard work, personal achievement, success, individualism, efficiency, practicality, affluence, consumerism, material comfort, competition, openness, directness, being well informed. So you might identify with some of these. There's a very good chance, if you consider yourself an American, that you identify with at least part of this list, but not necessarily all of this list. Okay. And so I think on the next slide, I think I share, it might be that I share mine on the next slide, or no, I have it in my notes here. So you can quickly circle or write down some of the ones that you identify with as your own personal values. But these are more of the common values for U.S. mainstream culture, which is, now it is balkanizing, which as a term means that it's shifting from one identity into a collection of similar identities, but then differences are going to divide and subdivide us more and more as we go. Okay. All right. So my personally, activity and hard work, personal achievement and success, competition, openness, directness, and being well informed. Okay. Individualism. Yeah, I see the benefits of individualism. I also see the benefits of being part of a group too. Efficiency and practicality. I like it, but it's just not high on my list of values. Affluence, consumerism, and material comfort. No, I really don't care. Well, with the exception of my video game system. So, but other stuff, I'm not motivated by having the nicest things necessarily. I'm more motivated by knowing a lot of stuff. So, yeah. And then I always like competition. I like to see athletic competition, mental competition. I like games. Yeah. All right. So assimilation is now, it was promoted. There's been a cultural shift since I was a child because assimilation was promoted early on I can remember that assimilation was the goal of American culture, is that we brought in these people from these other countries, other places on the planet with other beliefs. And assimilation is the idea and the process by which persons of a diverse culture over time give up their original cultural language and identify with and merge into another culture. Okay? Requires the person to give up some of their personal values, accomplishments, beliefs, so on, in order to blend in with the mainstream. And we still see this. This is still a function of society. And I spoke to it before. English is the language of commerce. And so participating in employment and the marketplace, the workforce, getting a job, earning a wage, not always, but nearly universally, the language of business and the language that we conduct commerce in the United States is the English language. And so therefore, at a minimum, if you want to buy and sell things, you have to speak English. Okay. Not in every transaction. Okay, you might find the exception to the rule where you can go to sections of Antioch and walk into a grocery store that looks different than the Kroger, and you might have to conduct commerce in Spanish or Laotian or Korean or what have you, or Kurdish. But an individual going through a year's worth of commerce activities, eventually one of those transactions requires understanding of the English language. Okay? And so some of those expectations, those baseline subconscious expectations we don't even think about, impact people in ways that don't impact us. Okay? So assimilation, a lot of businesses aren't open on Sunday. And so, maybe Sunday is your day to want to go have fun. Well, your options are limited. Your options are limited because this is a Christian dominant society. And the only thing open on Sunday morning is the churches. Maybe the gas stations and convenience stores too. But for the most part, we shut down a lot of stuff and a lot of venues, and because they know no one's going to go during those times because everyone's at church. And so that kind of forces your weekly schedule. There are certain things that you won't be able to do on Sunday morning because those things involve soliciting businesses or other places that you don't have access to on Sunday morning. So, yeah. Now, biculturalism is the ability of individuals to be able to negotiate competently between two or more cultures, the mainstream culture and the individual's own culture, a comfortable balance for the individual between cultures. And that really is a healthy mindset. Okay, it enriches your life to understand your ancestry, to understand where you came from. What language did your grandparents speak? Were they born and raised here? How far back do you have to go before someone was riding on a boat or flying in an airplane to get here? Okay, and so we all have a backstory, and our family has a backstory, and that's part of our identity. It's part of that is our connection back to the human family, all of us, human civilization. Our tether, our branch on the tree goes back through our family tree. And so if we don't understand who we are We don't understand where we came from. We can't place value on that because we don't know it. And so placing value on other folks' backgrounds different from your own starts with appreciating your own background. Okay? No, I did not just advocate white supremacy. God bless. I advocated Viking supremacy because I'm from northern Germany, just south of Denmark. I forget what it's. I'll say it's. Oh God, I had it. I just had it. I've forgotten it. It's not. Oh God, Saxony is part of it. Saxony. I can't remember the first word. But yeah, it's in northern Germany. It's a province in northern Germany, and that's where my mother's family descend from, and it's really close to Norway and Sweden, and so yeah, definitely Viking blood running through my veins. So yeah, but not Viking supremacy or white supremacy. So, and I really want a Viking tattoo, but why am I not getting one? Because those are associated with white supremacy movements right now. It sucks so bad to be from northern Germany, Norwegian and Swedish, because the symbols of Old Norse have been perverted by white supremacists, and it's not appropriate for me to get some of those tattoos. So, because they're listed as white supremacist symbols, it's unfortunate. All right, key diversity traits. Age, ethnicity, national origin, race, gender, sexual orientation, mental ability, physical ability. These are not all diversity traits, but these are some of the ones that come to the front burner and could create issues in patient care. Okay. Yeah, age is a big one. The old people and the young people, it's like two different sets of human beings. It really is. That's why the boomers and the millennials fight with each other constantly, is because the other generation looks like space aliens to the millennials. The boomers look like archaic space aliens, and the boomers think that the millennials are lazy and just want the computer to do everything. Okay, and yeah, it is what it is. Okay, but differetions in these, you change a number of these, or you change any one of these, and your patient's going to be behaving differently. Okay. All right, so we want to acknowledge these differences, but we don't want that to be a launching point for an argument. We also don't want to make assumptions based on, well, if I was in their shoes, this is what that doesn't work when you're dealing with these differences. Okay, what you would do is irrelevant. Okay, it really is. It's their life, it's their story, it's their back history. It's not yours. Okay, you would do something different because you're a different person. Okay, and so just like you make your own choices, understand that these people have the same right to make their own choices. Okay, you might not understand their choices, you might not agree with their choices, but you have to respect the right that each of us, that's what living life is we encounter problems, we have goals, we have struggles, we have achievements that we want to accomplish. Some of us have burdens. Some of us have large burdens. Some of us have minor inconveniences. Okay? But each and every one of us recognizes that ultimately it's our life and we get to live it. We get to decide. Okay? So understand your personal biases. Understand that we're a judgmental people. Americans are judgmental. The younger folks are getting better at not being judgmental, and that is one of the shining points of the millennials and the zennials that follow them. Is they are so less judgmental than boomers and even my generation, Generation X, which might even be more judgmental than the boomers. Understand the values of the individual regardless of his or her condition in life. You're still dealing with a human being when you're performing that exam. Okay? Seek to learn from others you meet and interact with. Okay? And so the way it's the way that it lands. Yeah, and that's what they told us at the Atlanta conference this week. We had a topic related to this. And it's the way that it lands and so the impressions you're giving as a technologist, the impressions I'm giving as a teacher it's the way that it lands. Okay? It's not what I said, it's what you heard. What did you perceive that I said? And how did it make you feel? Was I dismissive? I can be that way sometimes. Was I caring and understanding? I can also be that way. Each and every one of us brings with us our own baggage, our own journey. And that because we have that baggage, we have value judgments. Because we have value judgments, we have biases, both conscious and subconscious. Because we have those, every interaction with everyone else, we frame it from a certain perspective. It's subconscious. It's our perspective. We frame it from where we are coming from. We need to recognize that they're doing the same thing. The person we're interacting with, they're doing the same thing. They're framing it from where they come from and their baggage and their personal values, their judgments, their biases. And so, yeah, that's how we get to awkward conversations. That's how we get to a miscommunication or a misunderstanding. Okay? But keep it on your radar. And you're already ahead of the game. If you keep it on your radar, you're already ahead of the game. If you say, wait a second, this person is very different than me. Bang, you just moved it to the front burner. And now you're looking for when there might be a miscommunication because they're from a different culture and they just don't understand what you're saying. Okay? I had that with we had a student from, where was he from? He was from Iraq. And I speak in American idioms. Everyone does. We say, just a wee bit. And that dog ain't gonna hunt. Right now, if you was raised around here, you know what I said. But if you were raised in Iraq, what dog are you talking about, Mr.? I don't see a dog. And so, okay, so I've gone an hour and 23 on this. I guess I need to wrap it up. We're getting the point. Okay? So is society stronger with multiculturalism? Absolutely. Absolutely. Because it's a global civilization now, y'all. It's not pockets of us separated by vast swaths of wilderness and oceans. We can cross those oceans. We can build a railroad track or a nice paved tarmac road through that wilderness. We can run communication lines under the entire Atlantic Ocean. Yeah, they got high-speed internet. Physical communication lines running under the Atlantic Ocean. Yeah. Um, so we're not unpacking this box. Multiculturalism is here, and it's going to be the default. It's going to be the norm, right? Regardless of federal administration policies, regardless of cultural conflicts like we're in the middle of right now. You can't unpack this box. You can't repack the box that's been unpacked. You can't. Okay, multiculturalism is here. If we mean to serve humanity, that means we serve all of humanity. Okay. And of course, we have to practice empathy for others, but part of that is recognizing when they're not approaching things from the same frame of reference we are. All right, so 5 key elements of cultural competency to wrap this up. Value diversity, okay? Possess the capacity for cultural self-assessment, right? So yeah, figure out who you are, why you are the way you are, why you do things the way you do things, okay? Understand your family history, okay? It's just fascinating, okay? And it strengthens your own identity when you know where you came from, you know your history, you know back to your grandfathers and your great-grandfathers, okay? Having a consciousness of the dynamics of cross-cultural interaction, okay? I've said it several times, there's going to be some awkwardness, there's going to be some miscommunications, there's going to be some personal biases, there's going to be some assumptions without intent, okay? Be gracious and forgive yourself. You are going to step on some toes. You might mildly offend some people. You're acting out of ignorance sometimes, because you can't, and I really don't like that. It's like, it's rude for white people to ask where someone is from. Well, no, it's not. That's an opening question. Okay. And yeah, they might be born here. Okay. But what I'm really asking about is their family history. What's your story? What's your journey? What's your parents' journey? Right? It's really trying to get to know somebody. Okay. And I'm not apologizing. Yes, we do. White people do step on some people's feelings by saying comments that we don't think about. Okay. But that's not the intent of that question. The intent of that question, at least when I've asked it or asked questions similar, is I want to get to know the person. I want to figure out the cool stuff. I want to figure out the stuff that's different than my frame of reference, because I know white middle class agricultural rural upbringing. I already know that reality. I want to know something different than mine. I want to know how was the experience for this person in front of me, because I think that all the varieties of human beings, I think each and every one of us is fascinating. Each and every one of us is unique. Each and every one of us has a story worth listening to. Right? Adaptations of service delivery. Now, the book used to go into certain cultures. They would pick on certain cultures and say, for example, they would pick on certain Asian cultures are more herbalist, naturalist than believing in Western medicine. And so a Japanese man comes and gets treatment, and they prescribe him some medicine, and you might notice that he's frowning when he picks up the medicine, and he gets the instructions to take the pills 2 times a day for the next 5 days, and he kind of makes a sour face. What he's not telling you is he was raised in Buddhist tradition with strong herbalism and home remedy background in his upbringing. That's part of his culture. And so he's going to go to his grandma's house. And she is going to make him a special tea, like leaves from certain plants that she's growing on her kitchen window. And she's going to brew this thing up. And then she's going to trim some dry leaves from these plants and put them in a little baggie so that he can drink some hot tea immediately, but then he can go and make it himself at his house. He's not going to take those pills. He's going to try his home remedies first. Okay. Is that problematic for prognosis in Western medicine? It kind of is. How do you fix that? Well, you should maybe confront the individual and like feel them out. Do you at least confirm that they understand what the instructions were regarding taking the medicine. Okay. You could ask them this way. Do you intend to take this medicine? Just come right out and say it, right? Don't tiptoe around it. Because I noticed that you were like making a face, right? And they might just come clean. They might just say, well, no, this is not how we heal. We heal through prayer, meditation, and Grandma makes us some special tea with different tea leaves, and it heals, and the tea draws out the bad humors or whatever the belief is. And yeah, so at least you can confirm, that you have the patient intends to deviate from the plan of care. Now, at that point, you're really powerless, except for you can communicate back to the ordering physician. Is that telling on them? Yeah, but the ordering physician, this is a cultural thing. So the ordering physician is probably well aware that this is probably not the first rodeo with that. And at that point, it's the ordering physician's problem. Okay? But having that awareness, dependent upon what the medication was for and what problem we're trying to solve, maybe the physician say, okay, well, I'll see him in the emergency room in 2 days then. And so you have benefited that physician because the physician is anticipating that he'll see the patient again in about 2 days. So, all right. So how can you become culturally competent as I breach an hour and a half of recording for 17 slides? Gain knowledge of other cultures. Be willing to engage in other cultures. Become an excellent multicultural communicator. Okay, and so as you pick up things, understand that these are cultural. Now you can't make assumptions, right? Not all white people like sauerkraut. Okay, a lot of white people and horseradish. A lot of German white people like sauerkraut and horseradish, but not everybody who is white likes sauerkraut and horseradish. So, yeah. Is it going to kill you to taste sauerkraut and horseradish? It will not. I've eaten those things many times. So engage with other cultures. Try a side of sauerkraut next time you get a bratwurst or a hot dog. Yeah. It's not going to kill you. It's going to enhance the flavor of the sausage that you're eating, quite frankly. Okay. Recognize the value of empathy and practice it. Help others understand the value of multiculturalism. And so, yeah, you need to identify those biases. You need to be self-aware, right? And make any of your subconscious biases conscious. Do a little self-exploration. Figure out who you are, right? And figure out what your assumptions are. Okay. And you'll do this through experience and dealing with folks from other cultures. And then you'll learn pieces of those cultures. Like I was able to cite some examples today, like Dia de los Muertos. And what else did I mention? I mentioned the story about the Japanese man not taking his medication. Um, those are some things I've learned. And do they apply to all people in all individuals in that culture? No, but there are some common themes um, that could be within the realm of possibility. So, okay. So some of the variations that we're going to see is communication, space and time, environmental control, okay, biologic variations, and then different social organizations. Okay, so what do I mean by communication variances? Well, um, yeah, I'll pick on myself. Germans like to yell, right? Um, we like to, uh, when we're in private, we can speak in a normal tone, but when we're in public, we see no qualms. Like, let's say we went to like a village market and there's a bunch of booths and shops and such, and my wife is at a booth, um, you know, several booths down, and I see something at the booth that I'm at. She's like 30 feet away, and I see something the booth that I'm at that I want her to see. Okay, the German in me, I'm just going to shout her name from where I'm standing. Okay, other folks might think that that is rude. Okay, other folks, in the way that they were raised, you walk over and you say, "Hey, I need you to come here. I need you to see something." Okay, but no, yeah, I would. Hey, if I shout your name really big, it's because I want you to come see something, or I want you to come to me. So, and that's that. I blame that on my German heritage. I don't know if it was. It's just my family. I don't know, but that's how I do in public places. Okay, space. Egyptian men. Okay, you will if you've never talked to an Egyptian man face to face, you will know by my description. You'll know that they're Egyptian as soon as I describe to you what's about to happen. So when you talk to people here in America, social distance and interpersonal space is somewhere around 3.5 feet. Okay, and so if it's not someone you're intimate with, it's not your spouse or your lover, or your boyfriend or girlfriend or whatever. It's not your brother or your sister. It's not your mom or your dad. You're going to maintain about 3 foot of comfort zone. Okay. No, Egyptians and Egyptian men in particular, the comfort zone in India is, or not India, Egypt, is more like 4 inches, 4 or 5 inches. And so when you're socially talking to an Egyptian male patient, he's going to stand up. So he's on equal ground with you, right? That's also a cultural thing. But he's going to come closer than that 1.5 feet. You're going to be able to tell what he had for lunch by the smell of his breath. That's how close he's going to be to you. Okay? And you back up, he's going to take a step forward. And you back up, he's going to take a step forward. And so, yeah, that's a particular example. But interpersonal space is different for different cultures. Time is different for different cultures. Okay? Mr. Shepherd is a good example of time for white Anglo-Saxon Protestants. 3 o'clock is not 3 o'clock. 2:45 is 3 o'clock. And that means if you have an appointment at 3 o'clock, you show up at that location 10 to 15 minutes early. Okay? And that is WASP time. Okay? Now, other cultures, not so much. Okay? But if you set an appointment with a white Anglo-Saxon Protestant, you can go early because they're going to go early. And so, and that it reflects into his expectation for your behavior as an X-ray student. That's how ingrained in Mr. Shepard that is. So, environmental control, the thermostat. Yeah, I've said enough with that. This is already running long. Biological variations. I don't know if you guys have noticed, but I am taller than most folks. And I've said enough with that. Okay. Social organizations. Yeah, some people like crowds. Some people like get-togethers. Some people like parties. Some people like, you know, social outings. And then there's me and my wife. Yeah. We would much rather stay home. God, we get enough of y'all in healthcare professions, right? Interactions with people. Yeah, we fill our cup before the end of our shift. Don't need to go out and party with the people that we just got done working with and interacting with for 8 hours or 10 hours or whatever. All right. So in conclusion, this is a broad topic. It's an important topic, as you can tell if you read the news. Right? But what is fundamentally important, both inside and outside of healthcare, just your development as a responsible human being and member of society, you're going to encounter people different than you. You need to be humble. You need to put knowledge of your bias and your ignorance on the front burner. You need to slow down your thoughts and your actions. It takes time to listen and understand. Okay. They're definitely going to have a different perspective than you. Okay. Don't assume their perspective. Okay? Don't be afraid to ask. Just mind how it lands, but don't be afraid to ask questions about the differences. Okay. That's the only way we learn. That's the only way we get to understand each other. Is we got to have the conversations. We can't live our lives isolated from each other. We also can't live our lives in fear of offense of one another. We have to be willing to say, hey, what is different? And figuring that out. And I acknowledge it doesn't mean it's bad. It just means it's different. So, all right, I've talked your ear off. I think I set a record for the amount of time for a recorded lecture off of 17 slides. So, anyway, I hope you appreciated my treatment of this topic, a very serious topic. Stick to what's in the chapter 10, and what's on the PowerPoint, not necessarily my cultural and political ramblings, okay, for the quiz coming up on chapter 10. All right. Take care, guys.